Welcome to VSB After the Bell. I'm your host, Gianna Chell. With deep gratitude and respect, we are honored to be learning and unlearning on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Hamathquiam, Skohomish Ohomeom, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The Vancouver School Board is among the most diverse school systems in Canada, with an annual enrollment of approximately 50,000 students from kindergarten to grade 12 and adult education students. Do you remember learning how to read when you were in school? Was picking up a book one of your favorite parts of the day? Or did you feel a twist of anxiety in your stomach every time you had to read aloud in a class? For some, reading and literacy were enjoyable learning experiences. For many, though, the unfortunate reality is learning to read and write were major challenges that were often stressful. In today's approach to learning, we are addressing the challenges of reading and literacy in a more inclusive, flexible approach, guided by our responsive literacy framework. VSB's approach to literacy is holistic, interconnected, and considers how to decolonize the literacy practice. It is also strength-based to foster a growth mindset reflective of our current curriculum. To discuss all things reading and literacy in the district, we are joined by Ria Dolder, Learning and Instruction Literacy Lead, and Leslie Hunt, Teacher Librarian Mentor for K-12 students. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Ria, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Nice to meet you, Gianna. My name is Ria, and I work for the Vancouver School Board in the Literacy Department. I work with schools, a number of schools in the inner city, and within those schools, I do residencies, work with teachers, help with literacy practices. I also help with professional development for the VSB and other initiatives for Vancouver School Board.
And how about you, Leslie?
I've been with the Vancouver School Board since 2017, where I was teacher librarian at Kitsilano Secondary School for 6 months, and then moved to Begbie Elementary School for 4 years, and am now in my position for the past 2.5 years as teacher librarian mentor for K-12. In that role, I support teacher librarians across the district. I help develop their collections, I co-teach, offer professional development, and find different learning opportunities.
Very cool. Well, we're happy to have you guys here today. So this is a pretty robust question, but in a nutshell, how is reading and literacy taught in VSB schools? Can you break down our responsive literacy framework and how it looks like in the classroom?
Oh, good question. Well, actually, there's a lot of different teaching strategies and approaches that are used in the Vancouver School Board. You made a really good explanation of our framework. It is a responsive literacy framework, as you discussed. So the idea is that it's responsive to what the students need. So if the students need more phonics or phonemic awareness, or they need fluency help, the idea is that the teachers are responsive to the students in their classroom that are before them. The responsive literacy framework, it starts in the middle with the ideas of story, play, identity, wonder, and joy, and those fit in with our BC curriculum. It's the big ideas in the BC Language Arts curriculum. That's why they're there. Then outside of that, EAGLES, the components are fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, phonics, and phonemic awareness. And those are just key components for students for learning how to read, and depending on the student and their needs, those are the components that you would use to help them with using assessment.
What's the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics?
Phonemic awareness is when, for instance, some schools are using Haggerty, and that's hearing sounds and manipulating sounds, but not necessarily writing them down. And phonological awareness and phonics is more with the letters and combinations of letters and putting those together to make words, to read and to write.
So one is kind of using your ears and one is using your eyes.
Using your ears, but also using your mouth for phonemic awareness. So practicing saying a word, cat, what's the first sound you hear, and being able to hear that sound, the sounds in words.
Very interesting. And this framework that we're talking about today, so when we talk about responsive, to me it sounds like it's very individualized. It depends on the student, and then we cater towards what they need. Is this specifically designed by VSB educators for VSB?
Yes, it was designed by VSB educators for the VSB. And also, of course, you're using assessment practice. On the outside of the responsive literacy framework, it talks about documentation and assessment. Of course, you're using those assessments of your students to figure out what they need.
And this framework is used by everyone in the district, all educators in the district?
All of the schools in VSB had Literacy Day where they did learn about the responsive literacy framework, and you will see these in different schools. And I should just mention that also, as you mentioned, we're trying to have culturally responsive pedagogy and using the First Peoples principles of learning also when we're thinking about literacy.
Can you explain, because I think pedagogy is kind of an educator term, can you explain what that means when you say cultural responsive pedagogy?
Sure. When we're looking at culturally responsive pedagogy, we're taking into account our learners and their needs. We're looking at our community of learners and seeing what their needs are in terms of helping them find these elements that are found in the middle. So having resources that are responsive to our particular learners, having readers reflected in the materials that they're working with, and providing a variety of different cultural opportunities through our learning resources is what we're looking at for culturally responsive pedagogy.
Can you give a concrete example, Leslie, where you had to use that for a student?
Typically, when we're looking at libraries and our readers, but then applying that to our students in the classrooms, is looking at who is in our classroom and how can we reflect their needs and themselves in the materials that we're using. So, for example, 2 years ago, I was given the immense privilege of purchasing text for all schools across the district, with the main goal being representing diverse characters. Looking at our student populations, I made specific efforts to purchase titles that would reflect them. So focusing on characters that were Filipino, characters that were Vietnamese, characters that were Chinese Canadian. So making sure that those students could see themselves in their materials, helping them bring in that joy, that sense of belonging, seeing their culture reflected in the learning materials.
You know, representation really does matter. And as someone from Asian descent, when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of that. But today, I'm happy to see that there are more cultures and different skin tones being represented in books. And seeing yourself reflected in an early age makes a huge impact on kids. I'm glad that as a district, we are choosing specific resources that kids can see themselves in. Getting your child to practice or actually enjoy reading is a challenge, I know definitely for my kids. Well, why is this? I mean, my kid often says it's boring, but why do you think children struggle with reading?
If we're looking at getting kids to practice reading, it can be a challenge if it's made to be a chore, if it's made to be something that they have to do. If it's something that everyone in the family is looking forward to doing, then it's really easy to implement. It doesn't become that must do, it's a want to do, and it leads to, some really healthy learning habits. So celebrating that reading, making it a fun event every day rather than you must do your reading now, I think is a big mistake that some families make. So just, again, finding that joy, that sense of wonder, getting excited about reading will make that practice a lot more easy to happen.
Okay, help me make reading more fun, because I am definitely the typical parent where I'm like, you got to do your 10 minutes of reading a day. I tell my son, just get it out of the way in the morning, get it out of the way, do the hard work, and then you can go play. So how do you spark joy in reading without making it a chore when, as a working parent, I don't have time to sit down and read and be the role model that I know I should be?
I would say you do have time. I mean, it's often the bedtime routine in many houses. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you're spending that 10 minutes reading together, then that's great. And again, typically at bedtime, it's something to look forward to. It's a great way to unwind, turn your brain off, get them disconnected from screens and that sort of thing. So it actually is good sleep hygiene to have, the lights dimmed in the bedroom and reading a cozy story together. So making it something enjoyable for everybody and not that task that needs to be nagged at. But again, providing a variety of reading materials, something that they look forward to reading rather than, again, dreading like, I have to read this book. If it's something fun that they're interested in reading, then I think that makes it a lot easier as well.
Will it change when they get older? Because my son is 7 right now. Will he develop a joy for reading? Is it too late for him?
It's never too late. No, I don't think so. I still get to read to my 11-year-old every night. And I remember my dad reading to me throughout my childhood as well, something that I always look forward to at the end of the day. So, I started teaching my teacher librarianship in an adult school where I read to adults twice a week. They would tell their teacher it was time to go up to the library to read. So being read aloud to is something that anyone at any age enjoys. So just trying to keep that momentum going, or picking it up with maybe a story that your kids are interested in, then there's still hope.
My son loves to hear me read stories, and we do that every bedtime. The challenge is when it's his turn to read to me. What are some strategies there to make it fun and joyful when it's his turn to do the reading?
I think if you're taking turns during that story time, I think that's a really great way to maybe start building up that read aloud confidence. Something that you've already read together is a great strategy to use because he'll already have heard it. Chances are he's memorized a lot of it anyway. So again, just building up that confidence. And once that's there, then you can progress to harder and harder texts and reading tasks. So, giving them something that they can succeed at, I think is really important. And again, something that both of you are going to enjoy reading. So it might be like a silly book, something fun that makes you laugh, or maybe it's a topic that your son's really interested in. Get excited about it too.
How about for older students? Do you find any challenges with literacy? Are there any tips for sparking joy for secondary students, perhaps?
I think it's the same thing, yeah. And so we do have struggling readers in the primary grades and intermediate grades. And so I think for them too, it's trying to, the trickier part is trying to, if you have a struggling reader in the intermediate grades, trying to find books that are mature, but they can read the book. So there are books available like that. Leslie would be more of an expert on that. But it's all about finding something that they will enjoy, they're interested in, and they can actually read.
All of our high schools have books. They're called high interest, low reading ability. So again, they're on topics that are at a mature level, but the vocabulary and syntax is much easier for a struggling reader to follow. Some of them now even are being printed in a dyslexic friendly format. So the page color is different and it's a dyslexic friendly font. So there's some great progress being made on the publishing side of things. If they're looking for a specific series, the Orca series are the ones that are most common in our VSB high school. So they could say, hey, I'm looking for the Orca series. Could you point me in the right direction? And sometimes they're even in their own separate section, so they're really easy to find. I would also encourage students, again, to have that success. So maybe they're reading a graphic novel. Maybe they're listening to an audiobook and following along with the print at the same time. So just looking for different strategies where they can succeed rather than, again, making it feel like a chore or a task and something that they're not going to succeed at. So providing different ways and opportunities for students to see success in their reading. Across the sites, it looks like top circulating titles are the Japanese manga graphic novels. They're becoming very popular and lots of circulation across the high schools now.
So what supports can a student and their family access if they're having difficulty with reading or literacy, or simply just want to improve their skills?
Okay, well, one great thing is first just to talk to the classroom teacher. If your student is struggling or you're worried that your child is struggling, talk to the classroom teacher. If you can talk to the teacher or librarian, and you can also, if your child is having support from a resource teacher or a literacy teacher, you can talk to them about it and express your concerns to see if how things are going at school. You can find out about the supports and offerings from the school sometimes there's things for parents for their information sessions. Sometimes there's after school programs that you can enroll your student in. And so just finding out what are the supports and offerings from the school, what do they have available. Also, there's the VSB summer learning program. So you could put your child in a summer school program. There's a lot of different things that the VSB offers. Also, you could ask about if your child's class has any home reading programs. They might have a home reading program. They might have strategies for home reading. Some teachers have little bookmarks to tell you about what you could do to support your child's reading at home. And also talking to your child and finding out what they're reading, taking an interest in their reading, finding out what's hard for them, and maybe expressing that to the teacher. And then we also said just reading books and having conversations about books and just having sort of a rich kind of interest and trying to foster that love of reading at home.
We talked about the library earlier. Maybe Leslie or even Ria, can you talk about what does library time look like at a school from elementary and secondary level? Because I know my kid has library time, but I just know he comes home with books and then he goes back and then he comes home with a new set of books and that's pretty much it.
Typically in an elementary school, when students have a library period, they will have a read aloud. It may be a picture book. It may be a chapter from a chapter book. It may be a short story. Typically followed by some sort of literacy activity that builds on a skill that may have been introduced or a concept in what they've been read. And then the last part of it is for book exchange time. So they're looking at the shelves to find that new book to bring home. They're talking to the teacher librarian, looking for book recommendations and that sort of thing. Talking with their peers, often doing some buddy reading once they've borrowed the book and that sort of thing. In high school, it's a little bit different. It's a much more flexible schedule. Often classes will come into the library to work with the teacher librarian, and typically in those, the teacher librarians pulled specific resources that are meant to support a specific content area. But again, there is also a large variety of pleasure reading material. So students, again, during those sort of before and after school times, or maybe if they have some flexibility in their schedule, they might be coming in and borrowing books or talking to the teacher librarian about some different book recommendations as well.
A curious question. Do you think the elementary students read the books that they take home, and how often do the secondary students come in and borrow books?
The elementary students, I think a lot of them do read the books that they borrow, again, just sort of based on the popularity of books like Dogman and Captain Underpants. If I look across the district, those are the top circulating titles. And then Diary of a Wimpy Kid and The Babysitter's Club. Those are all of like the top titles. I would say those ones are very popular, well read, or looked at, because again, with the graphic novels, we have the advantage of pictures helping fill in the blanks. With high school, I would say a lot of students do read them. It takes them a lot longer. Typically, they're borrowing longer chapter books.
Okay, so speaking of books, what recommendations would you give to help students not only learn, but to love to read. We talked about graphic novels. From a parent standpoint, can we talk about novels with just words on there? And what books would you recommend?
There are tons. If we're looking at just beginning to read, sort of general suggestions like bright colors, again, looking for representation. It might be a particular interest of the student. Structure in terms of how the books are structured is lots of repetition for those really beginning readers. So if we look at the classics like Brown Bear, What Do You See? That structure is really useful in helping students.
There's some science
behind it. Pete the Cat's another more modern example, again, using a lot of repetition. And then if we're sort of bumping up the level of vocabulary and sentence structure, again, a bit more old school, but Robert Munch. After you're moving away from the picture books, if you're looking at chapter books, there's a series from Scholastic called Branches, and those are really popular early chapter books. There are still some illustrations, but a lot more words on the pages. So like Dragon Masters is probably one of their best known series.
Oh, okay, yes.
Super popular. They're usually not in the library. Owl Diaries would be another option. So those two series in particular are great early chapter. And then if they like that style of book, as I said, there's several other series from Branches that are really well done. If you're moving up, your kids, they're interested, again, it would be sort of something that they're interested in. Rick Riordan is wildly popular again, so that's the Percy Jackson series, but then there are so many other series. And then in addition to that, he has Rick Riordan Presents, where he's basically promoting an author who is writing sort of in his fantasy style. But these ones are quite interesting because they're from more diverse backgrounds. So Aru Shah is from an South Asian perspective. So again, it's another series, but quite popular because it follows a sort of a formula.
Well, I think this has unintentionally become a book gift guide for parents, which is great because the holiday season is coming up. I know that a couple of names that you mentioned I already have, so I'll definitely add to that collection.
And I would add, don't disregard nonfiction for our beginning readers as well. Another hugely popular series is Who Would Win. Parents don't always love them because they're a little bit violent, but the kids, they eat them up. I was looking at one school that has really high circulation, and Who Would Win was taking up more than half of the list, in like the top 50 in the last 30 days. And then for, again, high school, sort of looking more at genre, we get lots of requests for more genre rather than specific titles or authors. Like, there's lots of requests for romance.
Okay.
Yeah. Mystery, really interesting. Agatha Christie is actually popular again. It's a big comeback.
Wow, okay.
And again, fantasy is always quite popular. So across the grades, basically K to 12, we got fantasy readers. So there's lots of great options out there.
It really is wonderful to see the responsive literacy framework play out in action. It truly shows how comprehensive our framework is. Through supporting students with carefully selected reading materials in classrooms and VSB libraries, we are ensuring reading can spark joy, ignite wonder, and in some cases even help shape identity. All these attributes are part of the literacy framework, and it's designed intentionally. So as we develop a student through the literacy framework, we're ensuring that they have a lifelong love for learning. Ria and Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gianna.
Follow us on Instagram at VSB39 to make sure you don't miss when the next episode drops. Or subscribe to VSB After the Bell on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Special thanks to music teacher Mr. Bonnell and the Nightingale Elementary students for the original theme songs.
After the bell with the VSB.